Hi everyone, my name is Adi, and today we've got a very special guest, 2017 Toronto Regional Champion and a very good Canadian, Martin Gajdosz. Martin, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine right now.
And Martin, how did you do in the Players' Cup?
I got top 16 in North America.
Yeah, so for those who don't know, the Players' Cup is a 256-player double elimination tournament hosted by the Pokemon Company International, with invites extended to the top 16 players from the May International Challenge. And we're going to have 8 of the top 16 players from North America come onto this channel to talk about their teams and their runs to the Players' Cup. So make sure to subscribe to not miss a single one. Martin, tell me a little bit about how you decided to use this team and the process of building this team.
My memory's kind of been a little bit hazy about how this team came to be. Like, I just kind of threw the mons together at first with a kind of general idea of what I wanted to do. The team originally started off with Togekiss, Amoonguss, Incineroar, Dragapult, Porygon 2, and I don't remember the last Pokemon. It wasn't Gastrodon at the time, though. Initially, the idea was to use a nasty plot with Togekiss and have Moongus spore Pokemon or Rage Powder it away so that the Togekiss can sweep everything. The reason why I went with Nasty Plot because I noticed a lot of people were running both Togekiss and Amoonguss on the same team, and I was kind of confused at the moment. I was wondering why were there two redirectors? Why I would have made one of them a sweeper. And upon me saying that out loud, I realized, yeah, that sounds like a pretty good idea. And I made Togekiss a sweeper. Now, of course, now I understand that. I mean, I understand why people would run two redirectors, but it worked out fine for me.
I noticed there isn't actually a Togekiss on the team anymore. So when did you decide that Togekiss maybe wasn't the best sweeper?
I got rid of Togekiss when I realized that Braviary did everything what I kind of wanted Togekiss to do, but it also deals more damage against Tyranitar with its fighting stab and its physical attacks. I kind of still wanted the general idea for the sweeping to be there, so I went with Bulk Up on Braviary since no other move really would fit it. At least I'm not on this team. I know most Braviary run something like Rock Slide or like I don't know Tailwind, but I didn't need Tailwind because my team's kind of slow, and any speed control I need came from Max Airstream or Trick Room, and I didn't really want Rock Slide since it didn't really hit anything except for like Charizard. But Charizard isn't something I'll be bringing Braviary. I wouldn't lead Braviary with. I'd bring Dragapult in. So Bulk Up kind of was the move I decided to go with, and it was pretty useful, I'd say.
Great. Yeah, and so it looks like the team's evolved a lot since that original 6 Pokemon. Tell me a little bit about the individual Pokemon and their movesets.
Well, I've already kind of went into some detail with Braviary and Bulk Up, so let's try to explain the safety goggles. I know a lot of people run Lumberry instead because it protects against Spore as well, but also against Thunder Wave and Will-O-Wisp. However, in practice, I've noticed that not only do I get spored more than once with Braviary, I also found it more useful for me to ignore her Rage Powder because Amoonguss can't do anything against my common lead of Braviary Amoonguss. As such, ignoring Rage Powder was also good. Right, Brave Bird is obvious, and Close Combat is the fighting stab of choice because, well, it doesn't lower attack like Superpower does. It hits Tyranitar really hard. Oh, even in Dynamax. The EV spread is I kind of took it off of uh, Picolytics. I don't really know what it does too well, but it's there to maximize my bulk while still
Right.
picking up while still doing enough damage.
Yeah, and with both bulk up and max knuckle, you've got enough ways to boost your attack. So really, it seems like your Braviary is trying to live as long as possible with those defense boosts and with the Dynamax health boost, and increase its damage output slowly over time.
Yeah, that's true. It also helps that my Amoonguss has Pollen Puff, so I can heal my HP. Eventually, after a few boosts, it cannot be defeated by physical attacks, especially with Amoonguss on the field. Now, as for Amoonguss, you may notice that it's max speed. I figured that a lot of the time, since I'm going to be bringing in Braviary as my lead, or even Dragapult, using max speed is good because I could max Braviary and put things to and use max Airstream. And because Amoonguss is so fast now, it's able to outspeed base 70 Pokemon. It'll be able to put things to sleep that normally people wouldn't expect to be put to sleep. Like, for example, Lapras.
Right. I know a lot of people have been running 91 speed or 92 speed on their Lapras or their Incineroar or the Sylveons and all those Pokemon that can get to that number with a little bit of investment. And the biggest reason for that is because getting put to sleep before you can move is really scary. And Amoonguss, with timid nature and max speed, hits 90 speed exactly.
That's true. However, one thing they kind of miss is that max Airstream.
Right. And so once Amoonguss gets to 135 speed, when it gets that +1 speed boost, and it's going before a large chunk of the metagame that hasn't gotten a speed boost themselves.
And with 2 speed boosts, it hits 180 speed, which outspeeds practically most things in the meta, aside from, like, I don't know, Dragapult and Cinderace.
Yeah, so it seems like if your opponent isn't ready for this Amoonguss, it's really easy for your team to just run over opposing teams by putting things to sleep and getting the boost with Braviary or Dragapult.
Sort of, yeah. Of course, if they're running Trick Room, like Indeedee, Hatterene, or they're leading Cinderace, it's kind of harder to do that.
Right.
The rest of the moves on Amoonguss is standard. Focus Sash is there because it's not just because since I'm a lot frailer, I feel like I need to survive hits more. And Koba just doesn't cut it. I also want to survive expanding Force Spam.
Right, and I guess the way I've always seen it is that Koba Berry is great in that it lets you live 2 attacks from a flying type, but Focus Sash also lets you live 2 attacks from a flying type, and thanks to Regenerator, even if you take a little bit of chip damage earlier in the game, you can always heal it back and get your Focus Sash back.
Yes. However, the thing is that I more often than not do actually get reduced down to 1 HP because of my lower bulk. And that's why I run Focus Sash. Okay, Incineroar. Well, the Incineroar is kind of standard-ish. However, the one thing to note is the speed. It hits 80 with 84 speed. It hits 91 speed. The reason for this is, well, it's to outspeed Amoonguss. It's to mask the fact that my Amoonguss is actually fast.
Yeah, definitely. And then on top of that, because if other Incineroar aren't running that amount of speed, you just get the faster fake out, which is really valuable with all the powerful attackers on your team.
Because of the higher speed, my EV spread kind of looks a little weird. The 204 HP hits an even number, so something like I don't know, Super Fang will reduce it down to 50% on the dot. The rest of the moves are standard, though I chose to use Throat Chop because of Sylveon and Perish Song.
Yeah, Incineroar is pretty much a staple on any team that wants to pivot effectively in any capacity, and yours definitely wants to be able to do that. It also just has great defensive synergy with a lot of really powerful attacking Pokemon. For example, it has great defensive synergy with your Dragapult.
Dragapult's really standard. It's just, there's nothing really much else to say there. The reason why, though, I guess you can ask why is Dragapult on the team when Braviary does a lot of the same stuff it does? And the answer is quite simple. It's faster with a different typing.
True. It does hit very different threats, and I'm curious as to why you chose to run Protect on it over another move like Dragon Dance. I think those are the two common status moves that people have been running on Dragapult.
I'll admit, if I were to do this team again, I probably would actually put Dragon Dance on it. I only really ran Protect because I kind of wanted to use Protect. I just, though, to be fair, with the redirection, Fake Out, and, Fast Amoonguss, Fast Spore, maybe in the future, yeah, I should probably have ran Dragon Dance.
Sure, good to know. And I know that I think that Joe, who used a Dragapult team to get top 4, also had Protect on his team rather than Dragon Dance. I might be mistaken about that, but there's definitely a debate among Dragapult users of which one's better, and I really do think it comes down to the team specifically.
Now, as for Porygon, well, it's also pretty standard. However, I kind of wanted to hit harder, so I use a Quiet Nature. The EV Spread. Now, I'm not sure. Now I don't remember what the defense stat did, but I know that the HP and special defense make it so that I could survive a max strike from a Life Orb Modest Porygon Z. Most of the time. Ice Beam and Thunderbolt are coverage. A lot of people run Tri-Attack on Porygon 2, but I don't think it works on this team very well. I think the coverage is better. And Trick Room and Recover is standard. Now, as for Gastrodon, Gastrodon is the last member on this team, and I had many different options for members there. I don't remember the first Pokemon I had before Gastrodon, but I do remember using Terrakion at one point. However, I kind of began to realize that Terrakion doesn't have much defensive use, and that something like Hatterene and Didi would mean a lot more pain on my team. Gastrodon, on the other hand, I can't exactly explain this very well. It works as a ground type on my team.
Mm-hmm. And I know that when we had Gavin on for his interview, he was talking about how he really exploited the fact that not many teams had special ground moves, namely Earth Power. And so having something like Gastrodon is really effective against things like Duraludon, things like Rhyperior, a lot of Pokemon that are things like Excadrill, a lot of Pokemon that are benefiting from the fact that there aren't many ground types in the format, especially ground types that want to hit you on the special side of things.
Oh yeah, now that you've said Duraludon, that's actually part of the reason why I ran it. It hits Duraludon hard. The rest of the team kind of struggles against it. So, especially when paired up with a Whimsicott. Gastrodon there makes it so much easier. Terrakion didn't really help here because of its steel weakness.
And so you've got a really interesting EV spread, especially with the 27 speed IVs. Can you tell me a little bit more about how you came to that specific EV spread?
The 27 speed IVs actually was the result of me breeding for a Gastrodon in-game.
Okay.
It's meant to be slower than Porygon 2. The EV spread, I don't remember what it does.
Okay. And one thing I really like about this team is that it's got Recover on Porygon 2, it's got Recover on Gastrodon, and it's got Pollen Pup on Amoonguss. So you've got a lot of ways to absorb damage and then heal back up. As you're aware, I ran Comfy on my team, so I have an inclination for similar types of team building. This is something that I think is really important because in the first 3 turns of the game, a lot of people are going to Dynamax, right? And you get to, if you can stall out their Dynamax and then heal off that damage, a lot of teams struggle to put on the offensive pressure. And it seems like your team is very well equipped to not only stall that out, but also take Dynamax later in the game and really do the damage that you need to do then.
Yeah, this team is pretty defensive, I'd say. Peanut Braviary and Dragapult are my main heavy hitters, I'd say. And the rest of the team is kind of meant to help cover and patch up the weaknesses that those two Pokemon kind of face.
Right.
The problem is, though, I don't typically run both Dragapult and Braviary in the same battle. Rarely do I do that. And if I do, it's usually a sign that the matchup isn't very good.
And so, tell me a little bit about the common leads or modes that your team has, uh, and as well as the stronger and weaker matchups that you might know about.
All right. As for my modes, my most common lead is Braviary Amoonguss. Braviary sets up Airstreams. Amoonguss puts things to sleep. Braviary can set up with Max Knuckle and Bulk Up, and Amoonguss can, again, sleep. It can also redirect, and it can heal.
Mm-hmm.
So if I also run Dragapult Amoonguss if I want immediate offensive pressure, but Braviary is not cutting it. Another common lead I run is Porygon 2 with Incineroar or with Amoonguss. This is so I could set up Trick Room if I feel like the opposing team is pretty weak on the defensive side and would be kind of struggle under Trick Room.
Sure.
Another lead I run would be Braviary Incineroar, with a similar idea with Braviary Amoonguss. However, I lead Incineroar instead for Fake Out, Pressure, and Intimidate, and Parting Shot, so I can bring in Amoonguss and start spamming Spore. It's the same idea though as Braviary Amoonguss.
And so, what would you say the stronger matchups your team has, and what would you say the weaker ones are?
Because the team's biggest issue is that it doesn't exert immediate offensive pressure at all. It's kind of passive at first, which is kind of why I had a hard time kind of breaking through your team. I feel like Sand is actually a pretty good matchup because Braviary doesn't take very much damage from either Excadrill when intimidated, even with a max Rockfall. Incineroar can reduce the damage output of both Tyranitar and Excadrill, and Amoonguss can put things to sleep. And Sand doesn't typically have many ways to kind of prevent sleep. Also, if the Sand team has Dragapult, then Braviary does well against it because it's forced to use Max Airstream. Otherwise, you're going to be increasing Braviary's attack through Defiant. A bad matchup would be Terracotta. I'm forced to essentially lead Dragapult into it. Otherwise, I'm just going to fall apart. I also don't think... Sun is a weird matchup, honestly. Sun is either good or bad depending on how they built their team. I don't really know how else to explain it. I feel like the matchups with this team are kind of dependent on how the opposing team is built. That's why Sun is kind of a hard matchup to figure out.
That's something that I've heard a lot of people say about their Sun matchup is that they have a Sun matchup, except if the opponents have a very specific build of Sun, then all of a sudden it falls apart. And that's part of the interesting thing about Sun teams in this metagame is that they really have one or two tech slots that they can kind of change with their team. And if those tech slots are favorable against your team, then a lot of times they just get to win the game.
Both Cinderace and Porygon Z, I feel like, are even, but only if you know what you're doing. If you don't know what you're doing, then they're both bad matchups.
Yeah, and I know you've been using this team for quite a while. You said you topped the ladder on Pokemon Showdown with this team, and so if there's anyone who knows what they're doing with this team, it's you.
Indeedee Hatterene is another weird matchup because it depends on how lucky I get. Because of Gmax Smite. If I don't hit myself in Confusion a lot, then it's a good matchup. If I do hit myself a lot with Confusion, then it's a really annoying matchup. But I think it's overall slightly positive. I actually usually lead Gastrodon in front of them because of Max Quake.
It definitely feels like hard Trick Room teams really rely on getting their damage off early, and if you can just heal that damage off at the right time, then it's really hard for them to put that damage back on once Trick Room runs out.
Yeah.
Well, why don't we talk about some of the games that you played over the course of the Players' Cup and how those matchups went for you?
Round one was kind of standard-ish with Togekiss, Primarina, and like Excadrill and stuff. Game one, I just got played. I underestimated my opponent and I paid for it. It also didn't help the fact that his Primarina had Blizzard on it, so that Amoonguss kind of dies almost immediately. Game two, I kind of barely pulled it off. In game three, I'm the one who I feel like I did actually outplay my opponent in game three. Round two was very interesting, to say the least. The guy had Choice Scarf, Alolan Ninetales with Inteleon. Oh, not just that, but he also had Male Indeedee with Imprison. Normally I would run Trick Room in this kind of matchup, but with Imprison, that made things a lot scarier. And my team has three ice weaknesses with only one resist, if I recall. So yeah, and that one resist is weak to water. So Inteleon was going to run me down if I wasn't careful.
So how did you end up approaching that matchup and pulling it out?
Game one, I decided to not run the Trick Room mode and decided, well, not immediately. I ran Dragapult, but I was planning to set up Trick Room in the back. I was unable to set up Trick Room because he froze me. Unfortunate. Game two, I decided to lead my Trick Room mode. He led Indeedee. I couldn't set it up. However, I was able to utilize Gastrodon pretty well, since I realized that he only had one physical attacker. And he didn't bring it in either game, I don't think. However, when he was going to set up Trick Room, when I was going to set up Trick Room, I meant, he used Air Slash with Inteleon. He flinched me. That was really frustrating because I felt like I was going to lose that match because I was unable to set up Trick Room. However, a miracle happened on the next turn. My Porygon survived with 2 HP, and I was able to set up Trick Room, and I was able to win the match. Game 3, I was actually able to maneuver well. I'm a lot better. I made sure that my opponent couldn't really set up in Prison. And I actually managed to get a Trick Room up. Unfortunately, he froze me, and I was really frustrated. However, Porygon 2 did manage to thaw, and I was able to win because of that. I was able to set up Trick Room again and heal up. My Gastrodon was nigh unkillable because of those special defense boosts. So okay, I was 2-0, and I felt pretty confident in myself. I managed to beat a player that had outplayed me in round 1, and I managed to win against all odds in round 2. Then I saw who I was facing in round 3, and I realized this is going to be tough.
And who were you facing in round 3?
James Beck.
That's right, James Beck, who got top 4 at Worlds last year, is the reigning Latin American International Champion, and is probably the best player in North America.
Oh, he also won Toronto Regionals a year after I did.
Yeah, and I think he's won 3 regionals. Like, that's about as tough a matchup as you could possibly get.
So anyway, I was kind of trying to prepare myself for a tough matchup. Then I saw his team and actually thought to myself, this isn't too bad. It's just sand with Dragapult. So when I went into the game 1, everything went fine. I was able to kind of command a lead that he was never really able to get back. Game 2, I was doing fine. However, I targeted the wrong Pokemon with Braviary. When I went for close combat, I targeted the Excadrill that was I think +1 in defense. And it just barely survived, and it activated weakness policy. I actually had brought in Gastrodon instead of Porygon 2 this game because I wanted to cover Rotom Wash better. Because I realized if he had used Rotom Wash well with Nasty Plot, I wouldn't be able to win. Unfortunately, he didn't bring Rotom Wash that game, so So bringing Gastrodon in was a pretty bad idea. Game 3, he allowed me to get a max knuckle off on his Tyranitar for free. So yeah, it dropped immediately, and he was unable to ever recover from that. So yeah, my first week of Players Cup, everything went fine. I was 3-0, and I was absolutely hyped for next week.
Yeah, you just knocked out one of the best players in the world. And then you had a week off in between round 3 and round 4 where you were faced up against, I believe it was Luca Paz, Olivia. Tell me a little bit about how you spent the week in between. Did you prep at all, and how did the prep go?
Yeah, I prepped with a friend of mine. It was much of the same thing that James was using. However, he was using Togekiss. I felt pretty confident in the matchup, so like I didn't really go that hard in practice. However, when I did actually play him, he played pretty well. Game 1 was a very close. It was his Excadrill and Amoonguss versus my Incineroar, Amoonguss, and Braviary. My Braviary and Amoonguss were low on health, so any attack from Excadrill could have knocked them out. My Incineroar was pretty healthy, though. My goal was to make sure that I could heal off all the damage he has done on my Amoonguss and my Braviary. To do this, I was going to Spore him and make sure that my Incineroar does not get put to sleep by his Amoonguss. I had to kind of pivot a lot. Yeah, I had to use Regenerator to heal off my damage with Amoonguss, and use Pollen Puff on my Braviary so I could heal off the damage there. However, all the while, I had to make sure that his Excadrill did not KO either of those Pokemon. If he had done that, I probably would not have won. Luckily, I was able to maneuver just well enough so that there would be no issues regarding Excadrill messing me up. Especially since Excadrill has Swords Dance, so I had to make sure that Intimidate also worked well in my favor too. Game 2, he cleverly switched in Excadrill after yawning my Porygon 2, because I was going to use Max Lightning to make sure that he can't put me to sleep. Unfortunately, I shouldn't have done that. I should have just simply switched out Porygon 2. So I essentially wasted my Dynamax for that game because he blocked my Max Lightning. However, the problem was that he wasn't really showing that much offensive pressure on my team. I wasn't really that worried about what he was trying to do. And so in the end, I managed to win. Alright, so I'm 4-0. I felt pretty good. And then I saw that I was paired up against you.
That's right.
And one look at the team, and I was like, ugh. The big issue is that I can't put your Lapras to sleep because of Comfy. Because of Safeguard.
And so I mentioned in my video that this team felt really weak to Fast Amoonguss, and so we had a lot of techs to beat Fast Amoonguss, like 92 speed Lapras, 91 speed Incineroar, and Safeguard on Comfy that hit exactly, well, in this case, it hit 140 speed to outspeed Amoonguss, even if you got to +1.
Yep. So yeah, I mean, I assumed that you were going to have a fast Comfy, because I assumed that you would know about the existence of Turbo Amoonguss. After all, I was doing really well in the ladder on it with it, and I knew that you're obviously going to not want to bring in Goodra because of Dragapult. However, if I don't bring in Dragapult, then Goodra would just run down my team. So I was kind of forced to lead Dragapult and Amoonguss. However, the problem was I kind of screwed up game 1. I went for the Pollen Puff play on my Dragapult to kind of scout out how fast your Lapras was. If you were, wait, no, I didn't use Pollen Puff on my Dragapult, did I?
So my recollection of game 1 was that you clicked Spore into Lapras with your Amoonguss and Max Phantasm with your Dragapult, and I clicked Safeguard with my Comfy and Max Resonance into your Dragapult, which actually put it into Draining Kiss range after Life Orb Recoil, which allowed me to take the KO right away turn 2.
Oh, right. Game 1, I went for Spore. The goal was so I could try to reduce your Lapras's defense stats so I could kind of soften it up. I brought in Braviary because I thought that it would, because with close combat, I'd be able to soften your Lapras up even more. There's just one problem, though. Any damage that I could have done against your Lapras would be kind of healed off. Could be healed off by Comfy, so I had to kill that thing off first. Unfortunately, I was unable to do that in the first game immediately because, well, you knocked out Dragapult.
And so that was one thing that I noticed in our matchup was that, like I mentioned earlier, your team has a lot of ways to heal off your Pokemon. And so I really struggled to do damage against your team outside of against Dragapult specifically. But you also have a very passive team, and so I could also heal off any damage that you did using the Comfy. And game 1 turned into a slow and grindy game where I had 4 Pokemon and you had 3 after turn 2, which I think really ended up being the difference.
I think the biggest issue that I had faced with your team wasn't Comfy, Lapras, or Gudra. It was the Magnezone because of Grassy Seed. Because of Grassy Seed, I can't deal much damage against you physically. So I'm forced to use special attacks, but neither Amoonguss nor her Porygon 2 can hit you super effectively. Only Gastrodon can. But Gastrodon's a bad pick because Lapras can hit it super effectively with Freeze Dry, and Rillaboom can just one-shot it with Glide. So I kind of, and because you're using Grassy Seed on it, Magnezone, you're almost always going to bring Rillaboom. And because of that, I was never able to kind of beat you and beat your Magnezone. Game 2 wasn't all that much better either.
Yeah, so my recollection of game 2 was that you knocked out the Comfy pretty early in the game, but that also meant that I got to do a lot of damage into both your Amoonguss and your Dragapult with my Lapras. And if once Lapras started to take KOs, it was really tough for you to come back just because you had taken too much damage. So even though I didn't have that healing left over, you didn't have you didn't have enough damage output left on your team to be able to deal with the Magnezone in the back.
Yeah, I was basically unable to win. If you played well, there was basically no way I could have possibly won.
Yeah. And so, from my perspective, I had prepared for this matchup, except I prepared against the wrong team. I thought you were using a different team that you had public replays of on Showdown, which was the Dracozolt team that you'd been using. And that team was absolutely terrifying because Dracozolt deals with Lapras and Gudra, and Magnezone doesn't do much back to it. And so I was really scared to face that. And then I definitely breathed a sigh of relief when I saw your team, and that it didn't seem like it had a great matchup going into the Lapras Magnezone mode of my team.
you thought I was using the Dracozolt team because of Babiri.net.
Yes, exactly.
And you know what the worst part is? I actually had an idea of what you were using. So I did actually kind of prep for you while the week. And that's when I realized how unbeatable the matchup was.
And so with that, you got dropped down to losers bracket. And who did you face in your first game in losers?
I don't remember their name. However, one look at their team and I realized that they were really weak to Trick Room. And their only way of really dealing with Trick Room was kind of putting my Porygon 2 to sleep. You know what the weird thing was? The guy did have a Chandelure, but it was Choice Specs without Imprison. First game, he hit Sleep Powder on my Porygon 2. I was put to sleep for 3 turns. A little frustrating, but I was able to set up Trick Room in the end. And ultimately, he was smooth sailing from there on out.
And that really showcases, I think, one of the advantages of using such a bulky team is that normally when you get put to sleep, you just kind of lose the game. But with all the ability to heal your Pokemon, even if they're doing damage to you, if you wake up in 1 or 2 turns, you're usually not in a bad spot.
Game 1 after I set up Trick Room, I Dynamax Porygon 2, I believe. Okay, Game 2, I was able to set up Trick Room a lot more easily. And this time around, The guy thought I was going to Dynamax Porygon 2 again, so that I use Max Lightning. In Game 1, I used Max Lightning on his Togekiss. So this game, I decided not to Dynamax Porygon 2, instead, and use Parting Shot into the Togekiss, because I wanted to switch things up. He Dynamaxed his Weakness Policy Togekiss, and everything just fell apart for him, because he made the wrong play. So I ended it week 2 with a record of 5-1.
Right, and that took you into top 16 in losers bracket.
Not the most comfortable position, honestly. I have no safety net now, and in order for me to make Players' Cup finals, I would need to win 4 in a row. That being said, I knew what my opponent was going to be using for week 3. I, at the time, thought it was alright to deal with, but upon actually practicing with the team, I found out that it was a lot harder than expected.
And once again, you had a week to prepare for this matchup. And I assume you prepped in a very similar way where you played a lot of practice games with your friends.
Yeah. The problem was, though, there was a slight variance in the set. That is, slight variance in the Charizard my opponent was using. Since he was Life Orb on a Sun team, I figured that he wasn't bulky at all. I was wrong. He had bulk. On a Life Orb Charizard. I was completely caught off guard. So, yeah. He also led Charizard Clefairy, which is not really a lead I had much practice with. Because I immediately thought that if he was going to bring Charizard, he was going to bring in Torkoal for that extra damage. But no, he didn't.
Yeah, it's been interesting to see how Charizard's place in the metagame has changed. We've seen a lot of Sun teams that don't utilize Charizard, instead just relying on Torkoal Venusaur, when usually Charizard was a staple on those teams. And we've also seen some Charizard teams that don't have Torkoal at all, like Jasook Lee's team really just relied on Charizard to set up Wildfire and do damage with its own high base stats, perhaps with a little bit of help from Clefairy's helping hand. And of course, this team also didn't really require Torkoal and just abused Charizard Clefairy a little more than what we've seen in the past.
Yeah, you can definitely run Charizard without Torkoal. So yeah, game 1, I was caught off guard. Game 2, I tried preparing better by swapping out the Amoonguss in place for Incineroar. He called it and used Airstream instead. Alright, minor setback. I then critical hit his Clefairy and knocked it out in 1 hit. So that was great for me, bad for him. Unfortunately, Torkoal proved to be a lot tougher of an opponent than I had expected. And he started yawning me and put me to sleep.
Yeah, and that's another development that we've seen pretty recently, is that with the added damage output from either Venusaur or Charizard, you don't really need Torkoal to always be a big damage dealer. A lot of times they can have more of a support set and rely on and do things like click Burning Jealousy against your stat boosting modes and burn them. Or click Yawn and force you to switch out and really rely on Body Press and its very high base defense stat for damage.
Yep. So, ultimately, the game came down to my Braviary and Dragapult versus Torkoal and Rillaboom. I think it came down to whether or not I predicted that he would use Fake Out on me or like Grassy Glide. I predicted he wouldn't fake me out. He did, and that lost me the game. In hindsight, there was no real reason for me to not protect. I really should have. Especially since G-Max Wildfire was up. So yeah, I was eliminated from the tour. I was not happy. I was upset. I was so close to greatness, but I was just a little bit off. But one thing I learned from the Players' Cup is that I don't think Pokemon is meant to be double elimination. I think it's meant to be Swiss.
Yeah, and that's the difficult part of basically any tournament, but especially in the Players' Cup with the brutal double elimination format that 256 players go in, the top 256 players in North America, and only 4 players really get to come out. And you face one bad matchup, and a lot of times that it just becomes so much more difficult.
Also, doesn't double elimination typically have pools beforehand before in a much bigger tournament.
Yeah, and so I think that for Smash Bros, that's the normal format, is that they have pools and then they go into a double elimination to more effectively seed players. That was another, I think, a slight misstep in the organization of this tournament was that the seeding was based on the finishing how you finished in the May International Challenge, but the May International Challenge was not only in a different format altogether, it was in Series 4 rather than Series 5, but also it was a best of one with no team preview. A best of one with no team sheets available, and that's just significantly different than playing a best of three with team sheets available. And so the seeds were basically random. It really felt like the seeds were pretty close to random.
I mean, this is the first time TPCI has ever kind of done this kind of tournament, so I'm not going to really go too hard. But I hope that if something like this were to happen again, think there would be improvements like pools, I mean proper pooling, rather than and having the method of actually entering the tournament not be determined by a single elimination tournament, or not single elimination, but best of one tournament. But anyway, what you're seeing on screen right now is the code for my team in game. So if anyone's interested in playing it in game, there you go.
Yeah, and you heard all about how to use this team. And as I mentioned earlier, it did peak number one on Showdown. So we know it's a really strong team. It's a very interesting defensive team in a format that doesn't really have a ton of defensive options. So I really recommend that you try it out and take inspiration from it because it uses a lot of very interesting. It has a lot of very interesting modes and a lot of very interesting choices such as Braviary and Gastrodon that you don't normally see in Series 5 nearly as much. Uh, Martin, thank you so much for coming on. It's been great talking to you. Do you have any final words or shout outs that you want to give?
I'd like to give a shout out to Scythe for helping me practice. I mean, in between weeks, so I can better understand my opponents, and before the tournament, so that I could uh, potentially patch up any bad matchups I had beforehand. Also, one more thing. There's also one more thing I'd like to say. Ban ally switch.
All right. And with that, we'll see you next time. Martin, thank you so much for coming on.
All right, see ya.